Hello, moms and anyone caring for their working for or working with children and teens. This is the weekly Zoomcast workshop for moms. Every week, we bring you speakers and experts covering topics of interest to parents. This is a community that supports the important work you're doing to raise your kids. I'm Amy Matthews. I'm the host for today's show, and today our show is coming to you at 4:00 p.m. Pacific time. And next week we'll be here meeting at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We alternate between those two times since we have listeners and speakers from various time zones. Thank you for joining us wherever you live. So let me first introduce our speaker, Tracy Cheney. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and go right into her wonderful information. So Tracy Williams Cheney has taught thousands of kids over the decades, from pre-K to 8th grade. She was honored as California Elementary Art Teacher of the Year 2013. Her program was honored as a California Exemplary Program in 2015. And when art was cut from elementary school curriculums over the years, Tracy found other ways to deliver art programs to kids. She saw the need to bring art to an alternative high school, designed an integrated art curriculum called the Arts and Science Middle School, and created the first art programs for latchkey kids. After School Art Studio, which operated for 7 years. Her talk title, The Importance of Creativity in the Age of Accountability, has been her soapbox issue since the 1980s, when she saw the economic impact that on kids raised in the shadows of the movie studios in Los Angeles, and that they couldn't get those good jobs because they didn't have the training. Yet hundreds of creatives were imported from other countries.
I'll mute them just
who
for a
did
second.
have
I was just able to save the day
art
for
programs.
one of.
So without further ado, here's Tracy.
Thank you, Amy. Well, this is my soapbox issue for 40 years, and I have been on the forefront. I've also had my job cut because of just insisting on staying within the elementary art world, because it's really vital. And what I want to share to you today, moms, is also thinking about your creativity and where you are with all of this, understanding where your child is, and then, looking at the school environment that they're also in. So this is a whole lot that I'm just going to pack into my time right now with you. And I need to do a little tech thing here and share my screen. Let's see if I'm going to get that right. Let's see if we got it. Bring up my slides. Can you see my slides?
I can. It's just a portion of them right now.
Okay, so let me just make them big. How's that?
Perfect.
Oh, great. Okay. So as Amy said, you're guessing that I live in California, and you're right. And that was part of the process that I found of being alarmed a lot of years ago about what was happening in supposedly a state that really values the arts, and in a community, Los Angeles, the second largest city in the US, that values creativity. I mean, the creative economy fuels us. And I was really alarmed that our children were not even getting the basics to be able to compete for jobs here in this creative economy. So let's look at what creativity is and how we use it and what's going on with your kids so you can enhance what they're doing. I don't want to read all of my slides. A lot of this is going to feel like a lecture because I do give talks on this, and I want it to be, good for you with a lot of information. The only reason I'm pulling up my credentials here is because what I want you to see is that I've taught in 14 schools, and not just in California, but in 2 other states also, and in a lot of different schools. And in part of my career, I've chosen to be in the lowest end schools in a district because I really believed that what I taught was vitally important, especially to kids that don't get exposure. And then we've had a thing of, okay, those kids can only have reading, writing, and math, and cut that out of their experience. So I have a lot of personal experience in knowing what really works for kids and what we need to be doing. So we have gotten to this place in the American culture where we think that creativity belongs to others, but not necessarily ourselves. And let's look at why that is. So what I want you to think about creativity, we're going to talk about that as opposed to imagination, is that creativity is very much about connecting existing ideas or things. And I have Gutenberg on here because he didn't just invent the printing press out of nowhere. Presses already existed to make coins. And when he put the idea of some movable type with that, he changed the world. And the most important thing was getting the Bible out there so people could actually read it. Literacy became important, and you could see those ideas for yourself. And then I have the Apollo 13. In that movie, I just remember being so struck when those astronauts were stuck in space. They only had what was in that tiny little capsule, and all those really smart scientists on the ground, all the math and science and all, had to really look at what they had and be able to come up with the most creative solution to get those astronauts back safe to Earth, and no one was lost. And it's just an outstanding example of using creativity and why we really need to teach how to think this way. So part of creativity is just looking at all the stuff everybody else is looking at, and you see it a new way, or you connect things that are from very different spectrums. So in this case, we are putting imagination to work. And imagination, I think maybe I skipped a slide here. Nope, I didn't. Okay. Imagination is what doesn't exist. It's like something that you've never seen before or thought about. Now, Walt Disney had a whole group called the Imagineers, and that's what they did, was just imagine things. And then they started actually making it happen. I happen to love this quote. It just always is so interesting, and how you would come up with a whole scientific theory based on seeing, a piece of fruit falling, if that's exactly what happened. So one of the things when we're talking about imagination is being able to think in a whole lot of different ways, but holding several different thoughts at the same time in mind. So we need practice doing that. Well, little children don't need practice at all. They've got it. But right now, the era that we seem to be entering it, we've been through, all kinds of eras, but seems to be the how-to and the know-how, and working online. People, that's the kind of courses and things they're wanting to buy. So how do I do this? Or the books that they buy. How do I do this? I Google things for information, right? So Mr. Einstein has a good quote here. All right. So what I want to talk about is a long study that was done, and it is still used today to criticize schools. And I am not here to do that. And I obviously, having been a teacher in all kinds of school settings, I'm not here. Yes, there are things that I can say about it, but what I want to talk about is this is used as a way to beat schools over the head. But back in 1968, NASA had some psychologists develop a test for them. They wanted to hire, really creative thinkers, or we call that divergent thinking. You can think off in different ways. And the idea was, somebody thought, let's do this with kids who are in Head Start. So usually children who are in Head Start are economically, I don't want to say deprived, but they are in not in middle class or upper class kind of situations, a lot of time coming from poverty. And so they just administered this test, and they found out that these kids that you would think were not, were so disadvantaged, actually were scoring so high as geniuses in the age of 3 to 5. So then they decided, well, let's follow these kids and we'll administer it again. And they did 5 years later, and notice what a huge drop in their imaginative thinking, or what was considered genius thinking. 5 years later, in 1978, it was given to 200,000 adults in 1983. And it is still administered in lots of different ways. This is the first kind of testing that. And it just falls off, almost completely off by age 25. So what we really need to analyze is why, not that the schools are the cause of this per se, but what is happening here. And this was all done before we had handheld computers and all the things that we have now, causing distraction and, short-circuiting thinking. But it does seem, and I noticed over the years, especially, the iPad was invented in 2010. And with that, and small children having that in their hands, we started to hear a lot more from kids that school was hard. And I will say, school is harder. Curriculum has been shoved down. So what used to be like my kindergarten would now be considered preschool. First grade has been shoved down into the 5-year-old world. And so kindergarten is basically what first grade used to be. So yes, it's harder. The kids can do it if they are prepared. The problem is now we have a whole lot of pressures on teachers and kids that weren't there before. And it really comes from the electronics, I think, and what I've observed. So schools, we passed through this time of just extreme accountability. And what has that meant for kids? It's meant that they've been really taught to get good at finding the one right answer. So that's very convergent thinking. It's narrowly focused. I'm not saying that's wrong, but school gets very good at teaching what you are demanding that schools teach. So what is also happened is that time for kids to be able to create things on their own is just almost non-existent. And Dr. Seuss, I think this is a great quote. So we need kids to be able to think right and think left. And that's referring to the hemispheres of our brain. And we have a magnificent thinking process. And this is only talking about 2 hemispheres. There's other very complex thinking and functions that we have as human beings. I mean, we're really, really marvelous. But we're just going to talk about the left brain and the right brain. This got very popular with an artist named Betty Edwards, who applied it to the art world. This was the new, all the new brain research that started in the 1970s being applied to learners and to school. And really starting to notice, I mean, you've noticed this within yourself, but kind of starting to quantify it. And when we talk about being left brain, that is all the stuff that you can learn by rote. It doesn't require original thought. It's completely opposite of the right brain modality. So driving, for instance, is a right brain activity. And that's why you cannot talk on your cell phone at the same time, and you will get a ticket because you cause accidents, because you're talking, which is a left brain function, but you're driving, which is a spatial function. That's why you get in trouble. So in school, look what we spend our time on. It's everything with the left brain modality. So all those things that we've decided are really important for kids to learn, that's what they spend their day doing. Very little time given to the right brain modality, which is where small children live entirely. So coming into school, so I don't want to say it as a negative, but coming into school and also growing up does impact this, because we are just doing different activities as we're getting older. So the small child is very much in imagination, and there's not really a difference between their magical thinking and how they're perceiving the world, and not really seeing differences between all that. That becomes the analytical brain that develops later. So that's why I say it's not really school's fault, but school does teach these things. Okay, so how are we listening to the right brain? I love this about a hunch. So when you are thinking right brain thinking, this is what creativity feels like, and you've all experienced this. You're thinking about a problem, you've been thinking about it and thinking about it, and maybe in the shower is where all those things come for you, or you're out on a walk. It's like, oh, you have a moment of knowing. That's your creative thinking at work. And you can't force it, and you can't make the answer pop up when you want it. Not like when you're in the left brain modality, can't do that. But when you're there, you know that it feels good. So there, of course, artists are hooked into this majorly, but scientists too. All right, so when we're being creative, we're actually doing something. And when I have kids come into the art room and they're sitting there, I've made a presentation, and I don't want them copying me, but I want them to think about what they're doing. And they're sitting there, and I ask them, what are you doing? I'm waiting for an idea to hit me. It's not how ideas get started. Doodling is a great entryway into your creative thinking. Doodling has a wonderful part to play, and you shouldn't let anybody tell you that you're wasting your time, or what are you doing, or you're not listening, because actually you are processing and you're getting ideas started. Now we want to make sure that in the creative process, you get a lot of feedback, but the feedback is not about you, it's about the work. And where we really need to help our girls in particular is that they can feel very criticized that it's about them and they can't do it. It's not. And having to teach kids, let's just look at the work. And what we're going to talk about is the work. It's not about you. But and so have to be so careful as a teacher, because you won't remember a spelling lesson in particular, or a math lesson, but you will remember somebody saying something that makes you feel bad about your art. And that will rumble around in your thinking and in your soul the rest of your life, impacting you. It is so profound because art is so tied to your soul. Okay, oops. So I have a little goof up in that slide there, a little space there, but when you're planning out something and all, that's preparation. That's not actually the doing of being creative. We want to get things going and get prepared. But we need to realize that we haven't really gotten started yet, but we can completely paralyze ourselves. I don't know what to do, because you're creating something that hasn't existed before. You can be inspired by other things, but we're not going to copy those things, because I want you to think this out yourself. That's why thinking can seem hard when we're not practicing it anymore. Now, creativity, that's a whole nother lecture about the creative things, or the steps that you can take about creativity and how artists work, and we can apply that to different fields, but that's not the scope of this right now. However, there are 4 things I want you to think about, because you can do these with your kids. So fluency, how many ideas can we think of? And we really want kids to have flexible thinking. So how many different ideas can we think about this? How many different applications, instead of just one right way to do it? And then when it doesn't work, you're so frustrated, or you think you're not good, or all those other things. We really want flexible thinking. Then turning things into other forms. And then what I really dislike is having to grade kids' art. But one of the things I would have in my rubric then, so, okay, you're doing all those things, great, but where are you in it? What can you do? What kind of idea or twist can you do that's going to make it original to you? So we really want kids to get back to, and adults too, the thrill of creative effort. It just feeds you, and you know how good that feels. So let's look where how kids develop, and then you can judge where your kids are right now in this process. This is really about visual literacy, because children actually start working in the visual language long before they have the words to describe what they're doing. So when kids are around 3, we want to make sure that it's natural for little humans to want to grab art materials, even if it's a pen or pencil, and let them have it, because they've got miles of drawing ahead of them to do. We don't want to stop that. But now with all of the handheld electronics, and it is no substitute for feeling this and needing to do this themselves. And it is a basic human instinct to do this. And we start seeing even 3-year-olds doing some really complex things, like trying to draw people. That's because they're drawing you. You are the most important thing. You are big in their life, and they are actually creating you. It is such a human leap in our brain development to realize that you can think in pictures, and that symbols stand for ideas. Now, this is the very same thing they learned way back in cave times when they were painting all of those beautiful animals. But those are standing for ideas. We're not just sure what that is. Oh, and by the way, I want to tell you, that's done by women. All the hands and things from the cave stuff, done by women. It totally changes the narrative when you know that. So between ages 4 and 10, when kids hit school, there is a very definite, predictable stage that they go through in drawing. And you can read it instantly. You don't need to wait for all kinds of tests. You can tell where kids are in their thinking. Well, that used to be very true, but with the electronics in hands now, and it's wiring their brains differently, now I have to really look at when a child isn't drawing at grade level, let's say that, they're drawing young, like they are in kindergarten, but they're still scribbling, need to look at, it's quite possible now that they just didn't have experience. And you cannot make kids jump to the next level just because we want them to. They have to get it themselves through drawing. And at 10, about 5th grade, we have quite a lot that happens. One, their depth perception really is now at the adult level, and their coordination improves. So kids catch balls better. You see them, wow, what a big difference on their little sports teams. But with that depth perception also comes the idea that they are not measuring up to the adults. And when they're looking at the art, and they're starting to compare, because that analytical mind has developed. And some people don't like to teach this age group because it's really a struggle for realism. You know, the little kids aren't trying to be better artists. They're going through the stages that they're going through. It doesn't have anything to do with being a better artist. They are communicating to you what they're thinking, and you can tell that. But here at this age level now, the kids, they have been in school now, you know, educated to speak and all the English and all the spelling, all of that. So yes, language dominates, which is a very left brain modality. We also have, as I've mentioned before, the girls, especially the girls that have had school mastered since they were in kindergarten. This can be really hard. A lot of the boys can push on through, but others just completely stop. And I'm seeing that clear down at 3rd and 4th grade, which is crazy that a 9-year-old is coming to me and saying, I can't do this and I don't like this. So what is happening in their experience that's causing this? But kids need to get over this human development hump of being able to draw realistically. It doesn't matter if you want them to draw abstractly. That's not where they're thinking. They're very concrete thinkers, and they want to be able to draw the person. And you'll notice a lot of times they can draw the body, and then they're trying to get the head attached. All of this struggle for realism is where you are at this point. This is normal and natural. But what we have happen now, because we've, especially for millennials, with No Child Left Behind, outwent so much of the art and all of this other stuff for the one right answer. And a lot of Americans are stuck where they were at about 6th grade. And so that's why I want parents to really analyze where you are and where you're feeling uncomfortable, or where you're feeling like, I can't draw a stick figure. I hear that constantly. Don't be apologetic. We just need to see this is where we are, and what you need is instruction in realism so you can move on past, and then we can get to the other things. But what has really been concerning to me, especially teaching at middle school, and it never used to be this way, but so many boys coming in absolutely crippled because we also stopped teaching handwriting. What wasn't tested on state tests is not getting taught. So that just fell by the wayside. So all that fluency and literacy and all of that, they are still drawing where they were maybe in 4th grade, 3rd grade. And now in 6th grade, they are really feeling very uncomfortable. And now you put them into art classes and you're going to grade them. And it is so backwards and so frustrating to everybody, because we need to understand where they are and have compassion for that. My concern is that they don't go into the careers that they would have gone to. I mean, yes, there are things that draw boys like architecture and engineering, all those things, but not being able to feel secure in the drawing may keep them out of that, even though so much stuff is done by computers. But this is something we have to be aware of. Kids need to be operating in both modalities. So in the school day, most of the day for kids are spent in left brain activities. If we can give them some drawing time, that's the visual thinking and right where the child lives. This other stuff, not so much. This is where they are. And it's so important that kids get that, because most children are visual learners, but their teachers are not. The ones who are really attracted to, literature, all of that stuff, and college and going into education because they want to teach kids to read, don't necessarily teach in the way that kids learn best, particularly our boys. Okay, so we tell a teacher or parents, the kids are gonna have an art activity. The whole classroom can change. It is just watching the dynamics is fascinating. Partly parents and teachers have creative anxiety, and they haven't been trained to do this. Or I've had friends who are art teachers, but teaching in a charter school that's just math and science, not being able to even teach the color wheel because that's art, and they would have to get permission and explain why they're having to do this. I mean, this is how far off we've gotten. But, we really exchanged, and I was a parent in the 90s too, when computers are coming on and all the debate about computer labs, and really that replaced so many art programs. I've lost my job more than once because of that. And now we're down to one-to-one devices, even at kindergarten. So when our current generation in school, our Gen Z was coming in, we were asking, what's all this software or the hardware going to be doing? We said, we don't know. We'll find out. And now we've got them coming into the job market. And we see how the rewiring of their brains, those devices are just an extension of them. And it's really interesting to listen to parents who are like employers and talk about the young people coming in, not just attention spans, but they said they don't listen to training because they go, well, I can look that up anytime. So it has had an effect. So when we're doing an art project, or in the art room, we've got the kids who are the math and science kids coming up and telling me they hate art. I mean, I walk in the room and I'm accosted. But I hate this. And this is like, okay, just calm down. We'll work through this. A lot of times these kids just don't have the motor skills developed, and that is a problem for them just in holding a pencil. Then we have girls, as I talked about, the girls who always get A's, and they just get what school teaches, they're just great at literacy and all of that. And when they're, oh my gosh, the worst classes I thought were ninth grade art classes where kids are coming in for the first time and now grades count towards college. They can't do it. They're following you around. They're clingy. They hate you. All of this over art projects. But what I love, and talk to the boys who maybe they are considered low in the class, maybe they goof around, but you know what? They're really good at this. And what we have to recognize is that boys, and you see it in preschool and kindergarten with blocks and cars and all the things that boys do, that is their spatial intelligence, that they are working in that and developing it. And we don't, I just feel we don't value that, and we certainly aren't teaching it, but it's a harder thing to evaluate. And school is all about evaluating, right? So, and comparing it, and standardized tests and all of that. So when I was on the board of an alternative school, a high school, I was just so stunned by the boys. It was mostly boys, almost exclusively, and we're giving them really low curriculum stuff. But man, their art was fantastic. If you live in a city like LA, you see all the tagging. It's going to have an outlet somehow. And it's too bad that it can't happen within school. But when we have these projects, I love it when these boys, can I do this? Can I do that? And yeah, let them go to town, let them shine and have a completely different relationship within the classroom. And sometimes what really surprises, if you have a child who's very artistic and it's like, oh, finally, we're going to teach something that they love. They are sometimes the ones that have the hardest time settling down. And deadlines and all of that doesn't exist for them, but expecting perfection of themselves and breaking down and crying and not being able to get moving because it's like, oh, I'm the artist and I have to be good at this, can just be a huge pressure on themselves. So I tell you all of this as a teacher and as a parent to kind of see where your child is, and when they're talking to you about what's happened at school or a project, this is why. Now, and don't we, George Washington Carver, who thought of 99 different ways that you could use peanuts to really improve the economics of the South. What a guy. All right, so I don't like putting school here as a creativity killer, but it's only the way that we're having to operate schools and not valuing this other part because you can't get the time in. And that's really the issue, is we don't have enough time. And also, it can happen in art rooms too, that if you're being very insistent on a specific product. So I don't like kids to copy artists. That is an adult at the peak of them working out many, 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 many years of problems to get to where they are. And who are we to copy that? You need to go through your own struggle to get there yourself and make your own artwork. So this is just some of it. And I am sad to see, even in preschools, that what is passing as an art project is a worksheet that kids are just coloring in. Kids will color much better when they're doing their own work, not just, this doesn't mean anything. And I talking to a kindergarten teacher, pardon me, who said, I'm having to teach kids how to color. They don't even know how to color. We're talking about 5-year-olds coming from academic preschools. We need to see how kids really learn and quit this. But it's very hard because you really have to have an okay from your school administrator. And this is the culture of the school. When I taught in the San Jose area up in California in Silicon Valley, I didn't teach at this particular school, but I was dying to get over there and never did because I was busy in my own school. But it was an elementary school where all these tech parents said, we don't want the kids to have tech at school. They will get that at home. We want school to be school and really engage in all this other kind of stuff. And I loved that. And it was coming from the parents, but I just never got over to see it. So what we need to do is we are teaching the subjects that can be measured, and not that they're insignificant or not important. And certainly our K-12 is driven by colleges and saying, we need kids to be this way, students to be this way. And, we shift, we make huge, colossal seismic shifts in response. And so school does what they're asked to do. but I am mostly very concerned about the boys, because we have a notion that boys are not maturing as fast as girls, but it really has to do, I think, with what they're good at and what they're interested in, and they're two sometimes very different things. So we really should not be expecting kids to all think alike. So, just some of the reasons why teachers can't provide more creative time. Here's the biggest thing. They do assign creative assignments. Where are these done? At home, by yourself, without instruction, and it's the parent's job to supervise it. And you really see the difference between parents who are very involved in a project and kids who don't have that kind of support. And they bring back their project, and such a difference. And then that just contributes more to, I'm bad and that person's good. And we can't know how much of that was actually created by a child. When it's looking pretty good, or when the kid has to talk about it and they can't talk about it because the parent did it. Yep, I've gotten a lot of those kind of assignments back. If, like in schools where I've been, and the kids get 45 minutes a week for art, that's it. They are getting art, so quit fussing about this. But I can't, in a 45-minute period, give a kindergartner all that they really need, especially kids coming into school that haven't had access to this. So for a teacher or an adult, a parent, you draw better than a 5th grader. The kids will really admire your abilities, so give yourself a pat on the back and you'll be okay. So we've all been in this, when you're even on the computer, and writing a project or something, we've all experienced flow. You've all experienced this. And that is just where we need to be developing our right brain. And so we just need to make practice time. And so if you've got a table in your house that's just always got markers and stuff on it, and kids can sit down, or you encourage them, or if you have to schedule it in, taking away the electronics for a while. And this is just practice. But when I have kindergartners come in for the first time to the art room and they don't know how to use an eraser, they're swiping left, thinking, oh, that's a mistake, and wanted, I used to think that was funny. And then I was very concerned and alarmed. So we need to value this and make sure that our kids are getting it. Now, what you can do with your kids is, it doesn't have to always be drawing, because part of it is thinking. So even playing, card games where you have to have, like we used to have ABC cards at home, and throw down an A. Okay, we're going to do all the vegetables we can think of an A. Or sometimes we'd play it. Okay, we're going to think of names, or just those are really easy things that you can do. Nothing that is hard. Also, just the way that you talk with your kids. It's kind of fun to take an object that they don't know what it is and ask, well, what can we do with this? Or what is it? I just put this in here, having elementary kids, discuss the difference or the alikeness of a potato and a carrot. So they're thinking about it. Now, with your older kids, this is a skill to get them to look at an issue from a different perspective, like yours. That is a really good creative thinking opportunity and exercise. Then I wanted to mention those kids when we get up to older kids, junior high and high school. A lot of times these kids that really do love art, and they haven't really lost that and are, sitting within it, are just, not even given the opportunity to have art. The way that some junior highs are set up, you have to choose music for the year, either band or choir, or you're put into a wheel, and then they do a whole lot of stuff trying to catch everybody who's not in music and give them some, and the kids don't get what they want, but they continue on with it. I just admire that so much of those kids. And in high school, you may want art, you can't even get it into your schedule, because those schedules are like college schedules. You'd either have to take a 0 hour, or you have to do it in the summer. Only the kids that are on a certain track for art can get art. But let's really look at those kids that might seem kind of quirky, but they're really they're really right brain thinkers, which is really awesome. So this, of course, is what we want all kids to be able to do. Well, I just want to thank you for valuing creativity in yourself too. Let's look at where you are. This book that I wrote, Getting Ready for Preschool and Kindergarten, is very much about the stages that young children go through in drawing. And we're talking from age 2, trying to reach the parents before they get to kindergarten, because believe it or not, kindergarten is almost too late. And so for some kids that have not had any exposure, kindergarten is not going to make it up for your kids. It can't. It's a train leaving the station with all the curriculum that the state says those teachers have to teach. And school cannot make up what the kids are missing. So we really need to make sure that our small ones are getting the drawing. And if they aren't, well, it can happen at any time. They still have to work through those stages because kids have to draw their way to the next stage. And so if that is the message that you can take, to heart for yourself and for your kids and for others, and as a teacher in being able to look at this differently, then I would be so happy to hear that you are really providing this time for kids. And I'll end on this note. Even though the stuff gets cut from the schools, it doesn't mean it's not important. It's vitally important for our economy, because we need, what was the US always great at? Innovation. We excelled at innovation, and we have just got to stay there. And the kids, just like what I was saying, or Amy said in the introduction, what made me so mad was to look at all these kids growing up around the movie studios who were excluded from ever getting any of those jobs. And we import talent from India and China and all over, where they have given the kids all of this education at a young age, and it just carries them through. It's very expensive to import talent, but our own kids don't get those jobs. So that's why, if we can make a case for this, let's make a movement for it. So I'm Tracy Cheney, and thank you so much for your attention on this important topic.
Wow, so much goodness and so many nuggets of wisdom were shared. I felt like I wanted to take screenshots. I know that I can go back to this later, but there was just so much that really is fascinating to hear about it from your perspective, because working as an OT in the schools now and seeing, especially through COVID and the limited activity that was happening fine motor wise for a lot of these young kids, and seeing, but then there's so much more than just that, the social emotional piece and all other too. But I shared your links in the chat so that everybody has an opportunity to check out your book. And
I'm trying to get out of this. Let's see. There we go.
The share.
I'm trying to get out of the screen share. Yes.
Okay.
Now,
so I was thinking, I wrote a couple of things down of things that really just stood out, but there was just so much. One thing I wanted to ask you, Tracy, is you mentioned how doodling helps with creative ideas.
yes.
And I was thinking to myself as you were talking about that, and I completely can see how that would be the case. And then I was thinking to myself, I'm often recommending fidgets for kids but I'm thinking about it from a focus standpoint, like when kids are needing to listen to some instruction or sitting during circle time or something like that. And I was thinking, well, you're kind of zoning out somewhat, but yet focused. And I was just trying to think if there was any sort of connection there. But I think that doodling is much more directly related to the creative process than fidgets are per se.
And some kids, well, I see adults too that do doodle and listen, but I think it has a lot to do if you're more of an auditory learner, that you could handle that. Like my daughter is very much was an auditory learner, and she could have her eyes closed and everything else, and a teacher thinking she's not paying attention, but actually that helped her to listen more. So for some kids, you just have to test and see where they are, if they're really listening, or we've zoned out and we're not paying attention to you anymore.
Right.
But I remember the first professors, like over at UCLA talking when kids were bringing cell phones to class. It was like everybody was, oh my gosh, because nobody looked at the professor anymore. They're looking down at their phones. So he finally asked, what are you guys doing? He said, we're fact checking you.
Huh.
They were not on their phone talking to their friends. They actually were listening, but
Wow.
yeah, using their phones in such a different way. So, we don't relate to it.
No.
We don't relate to it all. They are so different from us. We can relate back to our grandparents. I don't
Mhm.
think they can.
Right. No, I
It's just a
agree.
totally different way of
The
doing
fact checking
things.
would have been we would have had to wait to go to the encyclopedia or to,
Yeah,
yeah, it wouldn't have been instantaneous. That's very interesting to think
very
about.
interesting. Yeah.
Um,
Well, I get to tell you about Amy. And interesting that I happened to be on the late last night. I emailed something to Amy, and I knew she was going to be giving a talk today, really important about sleep, and go, oh, here we are up at all hours. Okay, so we're not following her advice. But what I want to tell you is that Amy is a sleep expert. And we hear a lot about sleep and how important it is, but she actually works with parents to support their kids who are having trouble sleeping and how much they are needing that to regulate their system. And I think to make a happier family time. And I usually think of kids as just conking out. They certainly do at school. So this was really interesting to me in having this conversation. And we connect when we're, better rested. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. So she offers parents tips and individualized sleep tools to support their kids who are in school to sleep better. So she works with about 6 to 13-year-olds. And Amy has more than 20 years of experience as a pediatric occupational therapist. And so she works in schools and outpatient settings and in private clinics. And she has dedicated her career in OT to working with kids who are neurodivergent. So that's including kids with autism, ADHD, and sensory processing disorders. And Amy, one of the questions I would have for you is, we're seeing so much more of that in the schools now. And autism has it seems like it's in every school, and kids, it's just exploded. And I'm hoping that you could even address that with us to know, parents that are dealing with those kind of challenges, plus just the everyday challenges of your kid not wanting to go to bed.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There has been, I remember when I was working in a clinic in Minnesota back in 2005, it was purely kids that were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders. And I remember talking to a lot of people. I went to a lot of continuing ed courses just to, learn as much as I could to better support the kids that I was working with. And at that time, I remember hearing an expert talking about, all these concerns about like the statistics, at first it was like 1 in 25, and then it was quickly, changing in terms of the rates at which, kids were being diagnosed with autism. And his explanation at the time was that there was better testing was part of it. And I think that still holds true today. But that also, there's a lot of different factors, a lot of, environmental. So I will definitely I'll go ahead and just dive in, and we can talk more about that further, but thank you for the introduction. I'm going to take just a moment to share my screen. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Now we all learn with this technology. Yeah. Although, yes, I do still like to just give a lecture in person, but we're learning to do all of this.
Yes, it always takes just a moment. It feels like I'm sure that there's a better way, and I just, I'm going to keep evolving and learning. So, all right. Well, I wanted to, start off with, so the topic is sensory supports, to help with sleep, but I wanted to start off by just telling you a short story about what's brought me to this area of focus. And it really began when my youngest daughter was a baby, where she really struggled to self-soothe. She never took a pacifier. So she really needed a lot of extra support in order to go to sleep. And so that really held true. And it was definitely a struggle, for her to get to sleep, to stay asleep. And so that kind of would rear up, we would get through a period, find some tricks that would work, and then, it would start up again, that it would be a challenge. But then about 2 years ago, there was a period of time where she was really struggling, with some anxiety around, it was, during COVID, and there was some concerns about illness, and she would really kind of get very focused on that, and it very quickly impacted her sleep. And so I ended up, just, through the challenge of trying to support her and having her end up in my room, on a regular basis, I decided to really get focused on getting back into some of the things that had worked for her previously, but I knew I needed to dig deeper. And so I decided to learn more about what else I could do to support her. So I hit the books, I, took classes, I tapped into my OT skills, even beyond the tools that we had come up with for her before, with some other sensory supports. I reintroduced sleep stories. Reiki was something that I had recently trained in. So we utilized Reiki to help her with just calm and relaxation. And then also introduced her to yoga nidras, which are basically it's a type of meditation, but it helps with deep relaxation. So things eventually began to turn around, and she was able to return to school, and we began to see signs of our normally very full of life daughter again. So today, our daughter, she continues to do well overall. Every once in a while, she gets off track with her sleep, or there's a little bit of anxiety related to something else, but we are able to get right back to the things that work for her. And she's really thriving in school and with her friends and at home now. So that was the impetus for wanting to support other families, and in particular, families of kids who struggle, as Tracy mentioned in the introduction, that maybe have ADHD, autism, or anxiety. Anxiety also has a huge impact, can have a huge impact on sleep. So I would like to have us take a moment, a few minutes actually, to get up and play and move. And this activity will help you to understand how sensory supports can help to change our mood and offer us a little bit of movement prior to diving into the rest of our discussion, just so you can get a sense for how that feels. So for the next 3 minutes, I invite you to connect with your own inner child and enjoy this short activity. So what I'll have us do is stand up. We're going to clear chair out of the way. We need a little bit of room because there's some jumping jacks at one point. So you need to make sure you're not going to whack into something as we're moving around. So let's go ahead and get ready.
Oh my. Okay. Well, actually, not a bad idea.
Yeah, it'll feel good to move. All right. Okay,
It's gonna help me sleep better tonight.
yes, it will. All right, here we go.
Here's a fun song that you can sing.
Turn it down a little.
Every little cell in your body ring. Pat every single body part when you hear this chorus start. Every little cell in my body.
So we're gonna just start
Every
counting
little cell in my body is well.
anywhere
Every
really.
little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Shake yourself, it's good for your health. Every little cell is happy and well. Shake yourself, it's good for your health. Every little cell is happy and well. Every little cell in my body is
Okay, now start patting
Every
yourself
little
again.
cell in my body is well. Every little cell in my body is happy.
You get your legs.
Body is well. Bend your knees and check.
All right.
Every little cell is happy and well. Your knees and
What are you
check.
doing?
Pose, please. Every little cell is happy and well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Reach up high to the sky. Every little cell is happy and well. Reach up high to the sky. Every little cell is happy and well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Reach for your toes and round the way. Every little cell is happy and well. Reach for your toes and round the place. Every little cell is happy and well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Here's one more, make a lion roar. Happy and well. Here's one more, make a lion roar. Happy and well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Every little cell in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well. Jumping jacks,
Right, jumping jacks.
every little cell is happy and well. Jumping jacks will strengthen your back. Every little cell is happy and well. Now let's do it. Stir. Jumping jacks will strengthen your back. Every little cell is happy and well. Jumping jacks will strengthen your back. Every little cell is happy and well. Jumping jacks will strengthen your back. Every little cell is happy and well. Jumping jacks will strengthen your back. Every little cell is happy and well. Every little cell.
All right.
in my body is happy. Every little cell in my body is well.
Oh, thank you for playing with me, along with me. It will definitely help us to sleep better tonight. Okay, so every little cell is a great movement activity and connecting activity for your body. So I've done this song with my own kids and kids in yoga classes that I've taught. It incorporates a lot of sensory support, movement, and tactile input with the touch input. So all good things. And if you sit for just a moment and just kind of allow yourself to check in with your body, notice that your skin is probably tingling a little bit. You've got a little bit more energy. You might be sitting up a little bit taller in your chair. I know I'm a little out of breath because of the fast jumping jacks. So working on getting my breath back, but it all feels really good. So I would like to, so for sensory supports, the sensory diet, I'm going to go over that in more detail on the next slide, but there's some other, sensory support ideas that I wanted to go over as well. So the weighted blanket, heavy quilt, or compression sheet, those can all be very helpful for certain kids. You know, this is definitely not a one size fits all, definitely worth kind of checking out. Some kids don't love weighted blankets, or it takes a little bit of time to adapt to it. So that's something to think about. Sometimes a heavy quilt just works just as well. So the compression sheet, sometimes, you know, if you know that your kiddo loves more snug fitting clothing. You know, I remember when my kids were in preschool that I had a little boy that was, it was a co-op preschool that we were involved with, and he would constantly be putting on dress up clothing, and it was always the really snug fitting stuff. So, you know, some kids really do well with the more, you know, snug fitting options rather than a weighted blanket. Magnesium and a high quality supplements. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about magnesium. It's really interesting. It is likely the #1 mineral deficiency in the world today.
Really?
And there are estimates that show that upwards to 80% of the population in the US is deficient in this mineral. So there are a couple different ways that you can look to add this into your life. I mean, there's certainly, I didn't go into this in this particular you know, sharing, but there are definitely foods that you can look to add to your diet. But if you're going purely with adding magnesium, there are the most effective way is to do it through a spray, because basically a large percentage, if you were to ingest the magnesium through a chewable or something like that, a lot of the magnesium can get lost in the digestion process. And so that's why the spray is better, or an ideal form of getting the magnesium. So one specific spray that I really particularly like is called Ease Magnesium Spray. But what I will share with you is that not all kids are very tolerant of the spray, because especially if you're deficient in magnesium, a lot of times you'll notice that there's like a stinging sensation initially. So I know this firsthand, that one of my children says no to the spray. And so another option for getting magnesium would be a calm chewable or calm drink. And the thing that's really wonderful about magnesium is that it can help with balancing blood sugar, optimizing circulation and blood pressure. It can relax tense muscles. For example, there may be a little bit of a placebo effect for me, but I have noticed that if I ever have like a Charlie horse or a leg cramp of any kind, if I spray the magnesium on that muscle, it almost instantly goes away. So I'm sure that there's a component to it that I know that it's effective and that I relax my muscles a little faster. But it also can help with reduction of pain and relaxing the nervous system. And the reason why I go into such great detail about magnesium is because when you relax your nervous system, it's going to be easier to relax and get ready for bed. It's going to be easier to go to sleep. It really can have an impact just on, every part of what is important for getting to sleep more easily at night. So I feel like it's a really good thing to look into. And then another thing to consider is a high quality supplement. So some kind of nutritional support. I personally have, for over 20 years, taken Juice Plus capsules, which are purely fruit and vegetables. There's lots of other options as well. The reason why I personally chose to take that supplement is because it's very well researched, and it has been very, very helpful. And I would say, if, for instance, if I feel symptoms of a cold coming on and I double up on, just like everybody has their strategies, but it has been effective for boosting my immune system. And again, all those things can be helpful for better quality sleep. Yoga is another great way to wind down or prep for your day. So these particular poses that I have listed here can be really effective. So you don't have to have necessarily a video or anything to follow along. If you happen to know some of these general poses, you could do, 1 or 2 of these with your children each night before bed. And then if your kiddo has, challenge kind of getting up and getting going in the morning, maybe just sort of easing with that transition of getting up and doing a couple of the poses that are mentioned for the morning as well. So later, in one of the last slides, I believe I have some links to, if you do want to look at the videos with some of these poses. So you're welcome to check those out. Let's see. Okay, so as far as the sensory diet goes, I wanted to give some very specific information. So sensory interventions typically last 1.5 to 3 hours, and it depends on what activity you're doing. So things, I would say vestibular input that we'll go into in just a moment is the longest lasting. It's powerful, it's longer lasting. However, you do want to be aware that some of these things you need to limit before bed, because if you were to, for instance, jumping on a trampoline right before bed would probably not be the ideal activity. And especially anything that involves spinning, because that can last even longer in your system. So it's interesting just to take that into consideration when you're thinking about these activities before bed. So I typically recommend heavy work or deep pressure input before bed. So as far as deep pressure input, these activities help with calm, and they're great to do anytime during the day, but definitely good before bed. So you can see one thing I wanted to mention about the rolling your child up in a blanket or maybe like a yoga mat or something like that, and turning them into a burrito or a sushi roll, is that if you were to do that, a lot of kids really love this. You do want to take into consideration if your child is sensitive to light touch, then you need to be a little bit careful about giving consistent pressure throughout, because sometimes when you're like rolling them up, you accidentally, might, there might be a little bit of light touch, and that can be off-putting for some kids. So you just need to be a little bit conscientious of that. But then if you were to roll them up, and then I oftentimes will say something like, okay, what ingredients do we need? And we'll put, different things into our burrito, and then, oh, we need to squish it up a little bit, and we'll, I'll put some additional pressure on top of the pressure that they're receiving from being rolled up in the first place. So there, again, with that idea, you can get creative and fun with it, but you probably, if it's right before bed, you're not gonna really go wild with how much activity you're doing with that. You might just keep it very calm and peaceful. As far as vestibular inputs, animal walks are one of my favorite things. Jumping the trampoline can be good, but that can also be, as I mentioned, you don't want to necessarily do that before bed. But for some kids, that can also be, there's a lot of input you're getting visually too as you're jumping. It can be a little bit too much input sometimes. So sometimes I limit that to like 1 minute of jumping, or let's do 20 jumps. So just be aware of that. And then as far as heavy work goes, this is probably the number one thing that I recommend to families. I'm often sharing a worksheet that gives you ideas on how to incorporate heavy work throughout your day, just so that it's easier. It doesn't feel like extra work for the families, but it's more of a, okay, anytime you can encourage your child to lift, push, or pull something that's weighted, that's a great thing to do. And that's an easy way to incorporate sensory input into your day. So I just want one way to think about this is, if you're thinking about, okay, let's say you have had a stressful day yourself, and you needed to go to the grocery store, you got your groceries, you've got a couple of heavier bags. Sometimes you might notice that after you transfer, the heavy load to your house, that you suddenly feel a little bit better. Well, that's heavy work, and it is great for regulation. It can increase your arousal level, your alertness, but it also can add a sense of calm sort of simultaneously. So it's great because it's much easier, to find the just right regulation with heavy work in and of itself. It just sort of naturally lends itself to that. So as you can see, I mentioned the groceries example, laundry. So if you have, even like a basket of laundry that your kiddo can slide across the room, I'll even have, as long as it's safe, I'll even have sometimes kids push their siblings in a laundry basket for a lot of extra heavy work. But that is something to take into consideration as to whether or not it'll get out of control or not. So those are some of the specifics with sensory diet activities. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is sometimes in the schools, sometimes we'll do it even more frequently, like once an hour. It's not that you can overdo it per se, but a lot of times it's hard to have it be much more frequent than every 1.5 to 3 hours. So it just that's just giving you sort of the guidelines, and you want to just do it throughout the day, and that helps with that overall regulation, which is going to be helpful for sleep at night. Okay, so I wanted to go into a little bit about the importance of considering physiological and emotional state of being. So as I talked about with my daughter, with her anxiety, in addition, frustration, overwhelm, feeling disconnected can all impact a child's ability to self-soothe and settle down for the evening. Circadian rhythms and sleep hormones can be impacted by many things throughout the day. One of these is something that, we'll often see in the news or hear mention of, but electronic devices mimic many of the wavelengths in sunlight that cue your body to stay awake. So that's why, I know that there are certain features within, an iPad where you can turn it into like night mode. So that can be helpful. I even personally take it a step further and have blue blocking glasses that I'll wear. I oftentimes try to get off of devices at least ideally 2 hours before, but if I'm being honest, it's, I'm trying at least 1 hour before bed, because it can really make a difference. And, the ideal would be that you're starting to lower lights, you're off those devices, all things that kind of cue your body to start winding down. So I wanted to also share 2 tools that can help address the state of being. So one is Peace Begins with Me. And this is an activity where it's very simple. I've taught it to many kids. I know a handful of kids that I've talked to have said that it's one of their favorites because you can do it discreetly, even in the school day. It can be used really anywhere because it requires no tools. It's just your hands. And my daughter, I know has like, she's known about Peace Begins With Me, this activity, since the time she was, I think, 7 or 8, and she's been using it over the years, and still goes back to it even now as a 12-year-old. So it involves acupressure points combined with words of a mantra that are soothing to the central nervous system. So we'll do it together here in just a moment. I did want to say I've had older kids that I've done this with, taught them this technique. And it can be fun to allow for a little bit of creativity within reason in terms of words that are appropriate, perhaps we should say, with substituting out words. Instead of peace begins with me, I am calm and brave, or something like that. I mean, you can allow, get a little bit creative with this idea. So as a group, if we could do it together, we're going to touch each individual finger to our thumb, and we're going to do it about 7 or 8 times. We'll do it, I'll guide you, and then we'll do a few times silently at the end. So it goes, peace begins with me. Peace begins with me, and then whisper, peace begins with me. And then you can bring your hands down to your lap and continue doing it with your eyes closed if you're comfortable with that. And we'll do it about 3 or 4 more times. Okay, so I'm curious. I know that especially once I close my eyes, I can feel a sense of calm come over me. And, it's not even, I know that I have family or kids rather that sometimes are not thrilled to do deep breathing exercises with me. And so this one is a nice one where it just sort of incorporates calm without necessarily focusing on the breathing, but your breathing slows naturally with this activity. So that's something that I really like about it. Okay, the other tool that I wanted to mention is yoga nidras. And I know I mentioned a little bit earlier. I want to share a quote. So the highest happiness comes upon the yogi whose mind is calmed. And that's from the Bhagavad Gita book. So yoga nidra, just to give you a little more information about it, it's deep relaxation. So it's a state of conscious deep sleep. The kids get an opportunity to unplug from technology and the pressures of the world. So this can help children to strengthen their mind-body connection. These meditations can be used at bedtime. The kids are allowed to fall asleep, although generally with a yoga nidra, it's encouraged that they try to stay awake and be more deeply relaxed than asleep. It's nice to have either like a sleep mask or something light to cover eyes, just to kind of block out any extra lights. And it's also encouraged that children keep their bodies completely still. There's usually a little section at the beginning of a yoga nidra where they're encouraged to maybe stretch their arms and legs a few times, or scrunch their muscles in their face, scrunch their hands, and then relax. So it's kind of a progressive relaxation into this very deep relaxation process. It has been a tool that I have very much appreciated in the last couple of years myself, but I have seen an incredible sort of impact on kids when I've mostly done yoga nidras with kids during yoga classes, but also, you know, with my own kids at nighttime. And I've had more than one child ask me, can I get a copy of that? We call it the Secret Garden in our yoga class. But this one little girl, I think she was in 3rd grade. She said, Miss Amy, I haven't, basically, you know, she said something along the lines of, I haven't felt this calm in a long time, you know, essentially that it was, she recognized that it was so impactful for her. So just finding those moments of calm and allowing your central nervous system to relax can be incredibly important as it relates to reducing stress and, you know, being in a better place for settling down for sleep. So those are just 2 of the tools that I like to share. But when I work with families directly, there's many, many other tools that can be personalized to your child. So I wanted to share next the resources. So the, you know, the yoga wake up has those poses that I mentioned on a previous slide, calm down yoga series for bedtime. And then the link for the yoga nidra for kids is just one example, one particular one to think about trying. And breathe like a bear is, I know that I mentioned that I have kids that are not always thrilled to practice deep breathing, but I have had a lot of kids who really, really, really like this book. There's also like a MP3, you know, that you can get for each of the breathwork practices. And you can look this, I think her name is Kira Wiley. Sorry that I don't have it here. I was looking in the link to see if I had it, but she does has a number of YouTube videos that go over this breath work. And one last thing I'll say about breath work right now is what I oftentimes will share with families is part of the reason why a lot of kids push back against breath work, in my opinion, is because they're instructed to take a deep breath in the middle of a hard moment. And that is not the time to be practicing deep breathing for the first time, or, you know, only being instructed to practice it then. It's very, very important to practice it during times of calm and to have it. I mean, just like when we're learning how to tie our shoes and it's muscle memory, it takes a lot of practice for it to come naturally, especially in light of the fact that when you're frustrated and angry and, you know, you might need a deep breath, it's not going to be an easy thing to tap into. So it's key that you practice it, in my opinion, whenever you can during calm moments too, just so it becomes natural. Again, deep breathing can be very, very supportive of your nervous system, of reducing cortisol, which is, you know, cortisol is natural, but you want to manage how much cortisol is happening for you. And that's very much related to stress. So these things can be very, very complementary and helpful for reducing stress. So
Much calmer having heard this.
oh, good. So if you have interest in meeting with me, I have this link, and I think we'll add it to the comments as well.
It's in the chat now.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm.
I've coined it well-rested and connected sleep vision. So it's something, sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties here. It's something that where we can talk about specific tools that might be, or just even like what's happening to give your child challenges with getting to sleep, and then coming up with a couple of ideas of things to try to right away. So I just wanted to thank you and honor you for taking time to carve out and join us today. And I look forward to possibly meeting with you soon.
Well, that's great. And people will be hearing this on the replay. So it's in your slides, it's in the chat, so that you can reach Amy if you would like to. Well, there was just so much packed into that. I love the idea, have your kids do heavy chores, 'cause it will help them sleep. Okay, so we all need to get on board with that.
Yes. Yes, it's a good one. Parents get on board with that too, because they get excited about like chores that are also good for them. This is great.
So why does, lifting groceries or laundry and things, why does that regulate the system?
So it basically kind of gives you some of those feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine. It kind of gives you a little bit of dopamine, similar to a weighted blankets, where if you have, it's interesting, I'll have parents when we're talking about a weighted blanket, I often have like a weighted lap pad. And so I'll have parents try these tools while we're talking about it and see if they notice in their body after just, 4 or 5 minutes of sitting with this weighted item, they oftentimes will notice, oh yeah, my whole body feels more relaxed. So it's true with heavy jobs as well, where you're the weights, the weight of, so think about like if you are a gardener or do some heavy duty like yard work, your whole body feels, yes, you might feel sore as well, but your whole body feels relaxed typically after that kind of work. So it's very much in line with kind of what's coming into your system, what you're getting from that, and then just an overall sense of relaxation.
That is so interesting. Well, I always would think it's just because you're tired out, but
Right. I mean, it
more
feels
than that.
that way too. It's more than that. It's
Yeah.
more than that. Yeah.
Really interesting. Well,
Mhm.
Amy, oh my gosh, there's just so much in here. I was really interested, like your comments about magnesium, which I'm thinking if you eat a banana, does that do it for you?
Well, I think that similar to like, well, I don't know if, I mean, this is just an example, but like, how they say with vitamin D that, everybody can use more vitamin D as well. I think
Yeah.
magnesium is similar, where you can get some magnesium from food. And maybe if you're really conscientious about like magnesium rich foods, perhaps, but I believe that because of the deficiency that I have read about and that many have researched, that actually you probably need, it would be beneficial to have a little extra. So
Well, bananas before bed.
yeah, banana is good. Banana is good. One other thing I was going to say, I don't think I put it in the note, but one other thing that Calm, the chewable, has been very helpful with is regulation of your bowels too, that there's something to it for that. So, the kids who maybe tend to have issues with constipation, that can actually be an additional benefit from it. So just want to throw that out there too.
Wow. Well, okay. So these are always have to go back over and get all this information. And that's why we bring you workshops for moms is, wow, having access to Amy may never have thought about these things, or what you're struggling with at home may never have crossed your mind. What's going on, and wow, here's a whole lot of natural things to do that seem very normal and all. Before we get into, more serious things, it's like, wow, here are really great tips that you can do at home to make a difference with your kids. And bedtime, I usually think it's they don't want to go to bed, but that's another issue. But staying asleep and all, these are just wonderful. And I do want to say that our third speaker, Jena, is a mom, and I know that you would really enjoy what she had to say today, but she's home not feeling well and with a child who's not feeling well. And I'm thinking what I'll do is we can put up a recording because Jena's been on the show before, and we'll just keep it with us two for right now, and then we will bring in Jena that way. And but Jena talks now. Jena is a landscape architect helping parents really design their backyards, but it's also to regulate the system. And it is so interesting how she uses nature to also do what you're talking about. And I think we've just kind of gotten away from being human beings and what we need. And anyway, I think we'll do that. And we don't want you to miss what Jena has to say, because she's an expert on some different systems in your body that I never even heard of. But we'll bring Jena in that way. And Amy, I just really want to thank you for, wow, just giving us as parents and grandparents. And I was thinking, you talked about we don't want to have kids take a deep breath when they're in the middle of an emotional moment. That's really interesting. I haven't thought about that, but when you're at school and dealing with stuff and kids are, it's like, take a breath. But now I'm thinking I like the peace begins with me. Maybe that is a great technique to use. So you know what? We're not just here for moms. We're here for teachers too. And we're all working with kids. We're supporting you here as moms, and some of you are teachers, but also to be able to give these tips to teachers too, because that's a tough job. We're here for you moms and being your village and knowing that you're doing a hard job, but for everybody who's working with kids, these are all wonderful things, really simple things that you can do to make a really big difference in the lives of the kids that you're dealing with. So Amy Matthews, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And everybody, next week, as Amy mentioned in the introduction, we will be here at 9 a.m. with 3 more speakers that are here to help you as moms do your job and feel supported, and that we see you and that we know that what you're doing is really important, because we're also doing the same thing. We just share what we're doing with you. And Amy, anything else you'd like, since you work with families, anything you'd like to leave families with?
Yeah, I just I think that we're just so happy to be able to pull, as you can see even from Tracy and my talk, that there's so much overlap and so much and I'm certain of that, like you even mentioned, that Jena, that there's overlap across the board. So I just love the idea of getting these ideas out there, sharing a little bit more of the behind the scenes to have a better understanding of, well, it's not just because it's important to color, there's all these components to it and understanding it, and not that we want people to feel like they have to have more work on their plate by any means, but things like having, the materials out for creativity, as you mentioned, and then my idea of, with the heavy work and incorporating it into your day, it's so important. We as parents and, understand how important it is to fold these ideas into our lives, so that we can address them, but also make it doable. So
awesome. So with that is the end of our episode today. And join us for your weekly mom pickup. And get your energy going and to get through the week and onto a happy weekend with a workshops for mom at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time next Thursday. Gosh, are we into February already? I think we are.
I think so.
Wow.
Might be
Okay.
right.
All right.
Wow.
All right. So let me, so Amy, I think what I'll do is I'll insert Jena's
Mhm.
her video right into here, and we'll say goodbye, and she'll be our last speaker then.
Okay.
Okay. And then I did want to do a little recap, but
Mhm.
we kind of just did it.
Yeah, we kind of did. I think
know.
maybe can we have that be our recap, or do we need to do, yeah?
I guess, well, since we're also here without our tech support too. So, I mean, we've just been really doing this great. Anyway, so let's, I will work on my technology here to put this video in of Jena, and just want to thank you. If we can do I mean, what do you think? I'm just going, if we stop the recording, did a recap and then put Jena in, I don't think that would quite work. So I
Yeah,
think I just need to put her in right here.
I think so.
Okay, and then I'll just let her video run then.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
So
thank
thank you so
you.
much, and look forward to seeing you again on Workshops for Mom.
Yes.
Okay. I will screen share and pull up my video, and you probably will be clicking off there.
Okay. Do you want me to pause the recording, or do you want to go ahead and just keep it going?
I think we'll just keep going,
Okay.
and
And
I'll
then
just do my screen share and catch her video.
okay. And it's okay for me to just go ahead and log off?
I think so. And if it doesn't
Okay.
work, I will find out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so friends, I am working to bring up a past interview with our friend Jena. Okay, let's see. All right, so hang tight with me here for a moment. And I think we can do this. Let's see. Okay, so I wore the same sweater, so it looked like we just had a nice smooth transition. Okay. All right, thank you for your patience. All the animals have rushed in and
Darn it. I can be distracting. No.
Yeah.
So are we ready for me?
Yeah, sorry.
Awesome. Okay. Well, my name is Jena Jauchius. I am a landscape architect and nature play expert, and I have been designing children's play, learning, and therapeutic environments for, well, 22 years now. And so in 2020, so when I say children's play, learning, and therapeutic landscapes, I'm talking about nature play spaces, outdoor classrooms, learning landscapes, sensory gardens, and all those places that children love to do their play, learning, and growth and development. In 2020, I shifted gears a little bit, and now I'm focusing on teaching parents and early childhood professionals how to create sensory rich nature play spaces at home or at their childcare center or wherever they care for or working with children. And so I'm just going to share my screen and introduce you to, can you see two little faces?
Yes.
Are we good to go, Tracy? Okay, perfect. Okay, these are my twins, and Ed and Alvy, they are 7 years old. And as all siblings are, they're very different from one another. Etta is a 24-year-old pushed into a 7-year-old's body. And Alvy will tell you that she's part dragon or dinosaur or both, depending on the day. But they're very different from one another. And I'll tell you, being their mom for 7 years has given me more insight and appreciation for the work that I've done and the work that I do than any professional experience ever could. And so because of them, in part, I've really kind of tailored my work to talk about children's senses and their nervous system, and how creating nature-based play and learning spaces really does, it is so incredibly beneficial for children at any age. And you know, those magical years that Irene was talking about, toddlers, you know, all the way up. I really focus on kids from 9 and under for the work that I do. But these are my kiddos. And so, and I love talking with moms. I'm just gonna flip through my Canva here instead of going full screen with it. I love talking to moms because we all want the best for our kids, right? We want them to, you know, have fun and enjoy their lives, and be happy and healthy, and just discover what lights them up. And you know, I'd love to see if I can find my chat now that I've got things all over the place. What are some things that you want for your kids? You know, I'd love to hear if you just want to pop in the chat, and I apologize. I'm all minimized here, and I don't know where the chat went to. So maybe Tracy, you could read a few out loud if you see a few pop up. But for me, I mean, as 7-year-old twins, I want them to know who they are and to live in their authenticity. Tracy, do you see any pop up? Feel free to shout.
We've got like doing activities together, and we have a mom who's got a 4 and 7-year-old.
All right, that'd be Mel. I know who that is. So anything that you want is possible for your kids, and it is through my work as a designer of children's play and learning spaces. I've realized there's one really big factor that us moms need to understand and pay attention to, so that we can better help our kids have a happy childhood, and to really set them up to lead happy, productive lives in whatever way that they're meant to, right? And so that one thing is their nervous system. And sorry, I've got Zoom here covering up my slideshow.
That's right, I couldn't get out.
Let's see here. Darn Zoom. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So that one thing is their nervous system. So I'll give you a quick primer on the nervous system, because it's a really complicated system in our body. Essentially, our nervous system helps us do all those things necessary for our survival, like breathe and think and move and eat, and, you know, all those really, really necessary things. But it's also our body's way of receiving information from the world around us. And it all starts with our senses. We have millions and millions of sensory receptors on our body and in our bodies that are constantly picking up environmental information. And so when we taste something delicious, when we feel the breeze on our skin, when we hear our friends speaking to us, all that information is gathered by our receptors, and it's carried through this network, this incredible network of nerves that we have, to the spinal cord and on up to the brain. And in the brain, this is where the information is filtered and evaluated. And so the brain is trying to understand our situation, right? And so once it does, it sends out a response back through those channels out to the body to tell us how to move, how to react, how to make, you know, whatever decision we need to make in that moment. And essentially, this process informs every moment of our waking lives, and it all happens at lightning speed. And I think it's just so fascinating. And so in childhood, this is that magical, rich time where kids are literally soaking up all the information they can about the world, about them in the world. And so every sensory system is in overdrive gathering that information. You know, as soon as they pop out in the world, their mission is to seek out and gather as much sensory information, have as many sensory experiences as they can, so that their bodies and their brains can build a database of sensory information, so that when they go through their lives and they have a new experience or they experience a new sensory experience, they have that database to draw from. Their brains and their bodies draw, oh, this new situation, it's kind of like that situation that I was in, and then their bodies and their brains can have that recall. Well, the more information, the bigger the database that they have, this leads to a smoother, more enjoyable, more centered life experience for them. So very important, very important. And so when kids are imbalanced or dysregulated in their nervous system, what does that look like? That basically means they're in fight, flight, or freeze. And I think there's one more F in there. I don't know. I can't remember what it was. But essentially, this means that they are in survival mode. Their entire being, their brains, their bodies, their systems are in a state of arrest because their systems are focusing on just getting through that situation. And it might be something temporary, like an acute situation of stress, or it might be something chronic that is extended out over a long period of time. But it really lessens their abilities to do all those beautiful things that kids are meant to do in childhood, like play and learn and socialize and connect and just, imagine, and all of these things that they do as children and that they're supposed to do. And so what are some of the causes? And I will tell you, it's similar for adults. What can imbalance their nervous system also imbalances ours. And some of these things include lack of sleep. Sleep is so important for all of us. Eating processed foods or too much processed foods, especially if you have a kiddo with sensitivities to chemicals and things like that. Too much screen time can imbalance our nervous system. Not getting enough movement or activity, also kind of related to screen time. Not connecting enough, not getting enough connection, whether that's with you, their mom, with their family, with their friends, with nature, being able to connect with themselves. All of that is really, really important and can balance or can cause imbalances in their nervous system if they're not getting enough. And then stress can come in just daily from so many different angles, and so on. That's not just the whole list, but there's more. It just depends on your kiddos and your daily life, right? And so with a healthy nervous system, this is where Tracy was talking about that state of flow. And with a healthy nervous system, our kids can easily access that natural state of flow where they can be in deep, rich learning, where they can be in meaningful, expressive play. They can be more imaginative and creative, as Tracy was talking about. They can more easily connect with others, with nature, and with themselves. They can be grounded and feel safe in their bodies. And this is the state that kids exist in by nature. And this is their homeostasis, where, this is where their bodies are always trying to get back to. And so what can we do to help our kids maintain a happy nervous system, or to help them get back into balance when they are dysregulated? We have to help them get back into their bodies. We have to help them have lots of movement and play experiences, have a lot of sensory experiences every day. And ideally, this is outside, being outside as much as possible, because outside where nature is, and I'm not talking about nature with a capital N, like wild nature necessarily. That's beautiful and wonderful. We don't always have access to it, but nature with a little n is just as beneficial. It's just as important. And it's right outside our back door. It's on our way to school. It's a walk in the park. It's just getting out in some fresh air. It's so accessible to us. Nature is restorative. And that's why, as adults, I'm sure everyone can think of a moment where they felt stressed out and they went and took a walk, or they went outside and just had some fresh air. A day at the beach, watching a beautiful sunset. All of these things are restorative, and that is nature helping us restore the health and balance of our nervous system. So I'm going to ask you a quick question, and since I can't see my chat, Tracy, I'm going to have you help out. I would love to know what your kids love to do outside. What do they love to play? What do they, I'm always curious what, because it's always so different. My kids, this is Alvy, the younger of the two. She loves to live in her imagination. And so I built a little sensory garden out in our yard, and we have a little space for her to have these little fairy garden pots. Meanwhile, my other daughter's over in the building area. We've got all sorts of building materials. She's out building something, and she was building a big slingshot before the winter hit. So it's always very different. And Tracy, if anyone's, oh, there's my chat. Building forts, making potions, walking through the woods, playing on the playset. Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. I love all of those. Let's see here. So I'll ask you another question. So what if you knew that you had an outdoor space at home, and it could be a space in your backyard, it could be maybe if you just have a patio, or if you live in an apartment and you just have a balcony, or maybe you don't and you have time in the park. But what if you knew you had an outdoor space at home that had the power to feed your child's senses, to calm their nervous system so that they can grow and develop with joy and confidence? I mean, that was really the reason why I mentioned just a minute ago, I built a sensory garden at our home, partly for the kids, well, in large part for the kids, partly because I'm a geek and that's what I do. But when I started creating this sensory garden at home, I knew it was something that was going to support them as they grew in so many different ways. And so, when I send them outside to play now, I know that they're going to get exactly what they need. They're going to go out and find what they need, sensory speaking, but they're also going to find things to learn, things to notice, things to observe, things to wonder about. I mean, there's so many different things that happen when kids go and play outside. And so I would really invite you to look at your child's play space, to look at time outdoors as a incredibly valuable tool in your child's health and well-being. And it's also a valuable tool to support you as a mom, because when I send my kids outside, I know that they've got this incredible space to go to. And if you have something at home, if you have a play area, could just be a really small nook that they have. But it is a space that they can go to daily. If they are struggling, if they're in sensory overwhelm, it's a space they can go to and balance themselves, to soothe themselves. If they're having a great day, it's a space where they can go and elevate and do all sorts of wonderful new things. But essentially, it's a really valuable tool for happy body, happy nervous system maintenance for them. And so I'm going to jump into nature play and talk really quick about nature play, because this is the work that I do, and through my 22 years of doing this, I am just in awe of how incredible it is for children's growth and development. So nature play is essentially, it uses natural settings, materials, and features to create an amazing wide variety of play experiences, learning opportunities, and therapeutic value. And the therapeutic value it speaks to the nervous system health that I've been talking about. But if you have a child with a neurodiversity, sensory challenges, additional support needs of any kind, the therapeutic value goes well beyond nervous system health. And that's a workshop for another time. But please know that these are amazing tools for children of all abilities and diversities. And the wonderful thing about nature play is that it gives kids the necessary healthy sensory stimulation to grow and develop in their own way. So if you've got a nature-based place outside, your kids will go out and find the sensory experiences and activities that are going to feed their body and make them feel good at any moment in time. And that's going to change from day to day. So just a snapshot of some of the long list of benefits that nature play has for kids is, we've been talking about brain development. Irene mentioned this too, brain development and neural connections, nervous system health. It grows body confidence because they're moving their bodies in all sorts of different ways, helps develop motor skills. It boosts immune systems just by being outside. Maybe they have their bare feet on the ground, but their hands are in the dirt. That in and of itself will help their immune system. It helps build language and communication skills. Tracy mentioned sparks imagination and curiosity, and it helps kids self-regulate their emotions and their behaviors, their sensory experiences, and very importantly, nature play helps children feel connected. If you're outside playing with them, they're connected with you, they're connected with their playmates, they're connected with nature, and of course with themselves. Okay, so at-home sensory play, what does that look like? And it's going to look different, I'll tell you, from home to home and family to family, because you are you're able to create a space that is tailor-made for your kids. What are their interests? What are their loves? What are maybe they have some sensory challenges or sensitivities. Maybe they, their different learning styles. I mean, all of that can be tailored to your kiddo. And so what I'm going to do now is the work that I do is based in the senses, our sensory systems, and how play and the senses kind of work together. So I'm going to walk through all of the senses, but I do not want you to get overwhelmed because, looking at all of the senses and picking nature play features and how to draw different sensory experiences in can be overwhelming. You think you need to do all of these things when in fact you only need to do a couple items. And my pro tip, and I have a free gift at the end here, my pro tip is a free download that gives you the key starting point in a tailor-made, irresistible nature play area for your child. But my tip is to start simple, start small, and start with what they love to do. So I'm going to walk you through the senses and give you some ideas, and hopefully give you a new lens to look at their play spaces and to appreciate their play spaces in new ways, and all of the growth and development that your play areas can really lend to your children. So did you know that children have 7 senses? So there's not just the 5 that we all know and love: sight, touch, taste, smell, and sound, but there's 2 more movement-based systems that I learned this from occupational therapists. So I'm just going to walk you through each of the 7 really quickly and give you a few ideas for bringing in different sensory experiences. So sight, it's so fun to make a child's play space visually interesting, and you can do that by tools that you bring in, like magnifying glasses, magnifying stations, kaleidoscopes, telescopes, all these things. But it can be as simple as going to Hobby Lobby and buying a $5 wind spinner. Artwork, chalkboards, garden statues, things like this can really bring in more visual interest and draw children into play spaces. Touch is a really fun one, and Irene talked about how important the sense of touch is. And nature brings in the most amazing tactile experiences. And so things like a fairy garden, I mentioned that. You can accessorize something like a fairy garden in so many different ways to create new and different experiences for their tactile senses. Now, the other image is a picture of a mud kitchen. And if you don't know what a mud kitchen is, it's essentially a workspace with a variety of tools that may or may not look like, like a kitchen area. But it's where that they can use different natural materials and different tools to experiment, make potions like Michelle mentioned in the chat. Mud kitchens are actually one of my very favorite things. And actually, I should mention, you'll notice that all of these different ideas and different images are actually multisensory. And that's why I say you can pick one and do a lot with that one, like a mud kitchen, because it is multisensory. Mud kitchens actually hit on all 7 senses. Taste. I don't think there's probably of all the senses, this is the one kids love to experiment with. And there's a lot of different ways to bring in the sense of taste to your child's space, whether that's having a little edible garden, a pot of herbs, maybe planting a couple blueberry bushes next to their swing sets. Maybe just having picnics outside more often will bring in that sense of taste into their playscape and to bring that new dimension and sensory experience. Smell is a really interesting one, and there are so many, no matter where you are in the world, there's so many different plants that you can include with different fragrances. Lavender is a common one. It's well known for its calming properties, but there's others like spacing on them, actually, like Daphne and jasmine and so many other different plants for fragrance. Oh, one really easy one is called scented geranium, and we have a couple in pots. And you can go online and literally order a scented geranium in like a dozen different scents. There's rose and chocolate mint, orange, ginger, citronella. So, I mean, literally you go online and you'll find so many fun and really interesting fragrances just out of one plant. It's really phenomenal. The scent of earth is something that we are all innately drawn to. I think it's in our DNA, but children especially love digging, and part of that is that kind of brings up that earthy aroma, and they love that smell. And so if you have a place that's okay to be a little messy, or if you have a raised bed that's okay to be a digging area or a sand play area where they can dig, I would really invite you to embrace that, because digging and, you know, with all the different tools they could be using is a really multi-sensory full body experience, and they're really growing their bodies and their brains in such a simple activity like digging and working with the soil. And sound is a really fascinating sense as well. And one fun fact about this that I learned recently is that sound is actually our fastest sense. We hear 10 to 100 times faster than we receive information from our other senses, like sight. We hear faster than we see, which is really fascinating to me. Because the sound then really kind of colors our experiences. And so easy ways to bring in sound is, you know, simple chimes in a tree, water play, sand play, outdoor musical instruments, pots and pans, you know, things like this, where you can really, kids can really experiment with different sounds and music. Okay, so we're getting to the last two. The last two sensory systems are movement-based systems, and they're both really big mouthfuls of words. Our vestibular system is located in our inner ear, and it has to do with our body's, our head's orientation relative to gravity. So are we right side up? Are we upside down? Are we sideways? So vestibular activities and features that really stimulate the vestibular system are these little nest swings or hammocks, image here, logs to jump off of, you know, rolling, spinning, rocking, running, walking, crawling. All of these activities stimulate and feed the vestibular system, which helps us navigate the world around us. And then the last one is proprioception. Another big mouthful. Proprioception, or our proprioceptive system. And I really find this sensory system fascinating as well, because it has to do with a couple of things. First, it's our body awareness system. Where is our body at relative to the things around us? Where are our limbs at relative to the rest of us? And so if you can close your eyes and touch your finger to your nose, that's your proprioceptive system telling you how to do that, body awareness, right? The other thing it has to do with is the use of force to do an activity. So an example I always give of that is you've got a paper cup of water. And so your brain will communicate to your muscles and your joints and your ligaments and all these things down to your fingers, the force it takes to pick up that paper cup of water without letting it slide through your fingers or without squishing it and sending water all over the place. And so with proprioception, you know, there's two activities here that you see. Gardening is a great activity for proprioception. So in gardening, you use all sorts of tools like a watering can. And so when you water with a watering can, or kids do, they get different proprioceptive input depending on if it's a partially full can versus a full can, because they're lifting something that's heavier or something that's lighter. My daughter here on the right, she's pushing a wheelbarrow full of water. Well, her body is getting an amazing amount of proprioceptive input because it's full of something very heavy, water. She'd be getting a different level of information if she was just pushing an empty wheelbarrow. So it's really fun. I mean, kids can really build their systems in really fun activities, helping you around the house, outdoor gardening, you know, moving their blocks around. All of these things really build happy bodies and happy nervous systems through play. So I think that was my last slide. And so if you want more, because I have so much more on this, I would really invite you to hop over to Facebook and find me. N is for Nature Play. And if Tracy or Irene could pop that link into the chat, please connect with me there. I give a lot of information. I walk through all of the senses and give lots of ideas for how to create play and learning spaces that really feed the seven senses. And also definitely invite you to grab my free gift, which is called Nature Play Their Way Quick Start Guide. And it really walks you through the key, the first step in creating a really irresistible nature play space that is tailor-made for your kiddo. And then of course, you know, feel free to reach out to me. My email's up there, but I'm going to stop sharing now. And let's see, stop share. And just express my appreciation for all of you still hanging in here at the end.